My name is Maya. I'm 26 years old and I live in the suburbs of Minnesota. For the past 4 years, I was the only one keeping that house from falling apart. After my dad lost his job, my mom only worked part-time at the library and my younger brother was still in high school. I paid for electricity, water, internet, even the credit card under my mom's name. But on Christmas Eve, as I placed the roast dish on the table like I did every year, my dad looked straight at me and said coldly, "As of today, you are no longer part of this family." No explanation. Not a second of hesitation. My mom stayed silent. My little brother froze. Have you ever been erased from your own family by the people who gave you life? Kicked out of the very home you've kept warm all this time? If this story hit something inside you, leave a comment below. Tap like if you believe family should never be used as a weapon of control. And don't forget to subscribe, because what they didn't expect is exactly what I was about to do next. I stood up, pulled the napkin off my lap and placed it on the table like dinner was still going on. No one stopped me. No one asked anything. My dad poured himself another glass of wine, his glazed eyes never looking at me again. My mom stared at the worn-out tablecloth, her fingers clenched tightly beneath the table. And Dylan, my little brother sitting across from me, stayed silent, his eyes on the verge of shattering. I walked upstairs, each step on the wooden staircase echoing years I had spent holding this home together. I didn't feel angry, didn't wonder why or what for. Every question had already been answered over the years. They just hadn't said it out loud until tonight. I stepped into my room and closed the door softly. There were no tears. No sobs. Just a strange silence, as if some part of me had detached from my body, leaving behind someone slowly packing up the pieces of her life. I pulled my suitcase from under the bed, opened the closet and took out the clothes I had mended with my own hands. My budget notebooks, birthday gifts I bought for myself, books I read when my parents were asleep. Everything went into the only suitcase I still owned. A soft knock came at the door. I didn't need to guess, it was Dylan. I opened the door. My 17-year-old brother stood there with red eyes, still wearing the winter sweater I bought him last year. The wind slipped through the crack in the door, icy cold, but not as cold as the emptiness in his eyes. "You're really leaving?" he whispered. I nodded. "I have no reason to stay." Dylan looked down, his skinny shoulders trembling. "If you go, who's going to pay the power bill? The internet? The water? Even the Netflix mom and dad still use?" I looked at him for a long moment before I answered, my voice light as air. "I can't be the wallet for this whole family forever, Dylan. I'm a person too. And I'm tired." He lifted his head, fear filling his gaze. "But they have nothing." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "I know. But if I stay, they'll never learn to have anything." Dylan said nothing. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He had seen me stressed at the kitchen table doing the end-of-month math. He had heard Dad curse at me when the internet got shut off because I missed a payment by a day. He knew I owed them nothing. I squeezed his shoulder. "Just hold on a little longer. Wait until you're 18. When that day comes, if you want out, I'll help you." "Can I go with you now?" he asked, his voice cracking. "You can't, not yet. You're still a minor. If you leave now, they can call the cops. You'll end up in trouble, Dylan." He nodded slightly. "Will you still text me every day?" "Always," I promised with a smile. He took a step back, standing in the doorway. I saw his eyes scan my now empty room, then settle on me, trying to memorize everything. He knew this might be the last time my room still belonged to me. I closed the door and locked it from the inside. The night wind came through the window, brushing the white curtains like a soft goodbye. I pulled out my phone and opened each utility account. Electricity, water, internet, streaming services, the credit card I had added Mom to. I didn't say anything. No warnings. Just removed my payment info and disabled autopay. My silent presence for the past 4 years had been the warning. They never listened. I rolled my suitcase down the stairs. The living room lights were still on, the TV still playing, but no one came to see me off. No one called my name. I paused at the doorway, looking at the kitchen where I once stayed up until 2 a.m. packing Dylan's lunches, where I washed every single dish because Mom said her back hurt. Now all of it was just silent memory. I opened the door and stepped outside. The wind slapped my face. No snow. Just cold that cut to the bone. But I didn't shiver. I just felt light. A hollow kind of light. My car was parked by the curb where I always left it. I placed my suitcase in the trunk, got behind the wheel. The street light cast a dull yellow glow on the windshield, reflecting my face, no longer the daughter of that house. On the drive to Naomi's, I didn't play music. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I just thought about one thing. If I disappeared, everything in that house would go dark too. And maybe I'd sleep without the dread of another bill waiting in the morning. Naomi's apartment was less than 15 minutes away. She was a close coworker, had offered me a place to stay more than once. I always turned her down until tonight. When I pulled up, the hallway light on the third floor was on. Naomi stood there in a hoodie, holding a thin blanket, eyes scanning the street like she was waiting. I got out of the car, hair tousled by wind, hands red from cold. Naomi simply said, her voice warm, "Come in. The spare room is always yours." I laughed, not sure if it was gratitude or grief about to spill over. But I didn't cry. I pulled my suitcase behind me, following her up the stairs, each step shedding another layer of my past. I didn't know what life would be like from here. But I knew something had ended. And something else had just begun. I woke to daylight streaming through a curtain in a quiet, unfamiliar room. Naomi had prepared a small space for me, a single bed, a particle board shelf by the window. I lay there a few minutes, letting my body register that I was no longer in that house. No more Dad's heavy footsteps in the hall. No more shouting downstairs. I got up, made myself a weak cup of coffee, and sat at a small wooden kitchen table. Naomi was still asleep. I opened my laptop, connected to Wi-Fi, and started reviewing every account I had paid for over the last 4 years. First, the electric company. My name was still listed as the primary on the account. I clicked Cancel Autopay. A pop-up appeared. Are you sure you want to remove your payment method? Bills will no longer be processed after cancellation. I confirmed. Next, the gas bill. Then the internet. Streaming subscriptions. Even the Netflix account I'd opened for Mom to watch shows. One by one, I removed my credit card. Every string of digits, every CVV code I had once entered to keep that house warm and connected, I erased them. Then I opened the credit card account where I was the main holder and Mom was just an authorized user. I remembered the day she sat in front of me, eyes glistening, asking, just temporarily, to buy Dad some medication. I promise I'll pay it back. I opened it. And in 4 years, not a cent was paid back. I clicked Remove Authorized User, then called customer service to permanently block the card. Finally, I went through each account's security settings. Blocked every device that had logged in from the old house's IP address. Changed passwords for my bank, streaming, food delivery, even email. Enabled 2-step verification. Everything that tied me to that house, I severed it. No notice. No goodbye. I wasn't acting out of anger. I did it because I'd forgotten for far too long that I deserved rest too. For the next 3 days, my phone stayed silent. No calls. No messages from the house. Only regular texts from Dylan. He told me about his biology quiz, his gym teacher yelling at a kid who forgot his uniform, and how the cafeteria's bread rolls were getting mushier lately. On the 4th day, my phone buzzed while I was washing dishes. A message from Dylan appeared on the screen. No power. Dad smashed the TV last night. Mom sat in the kitchen crying all night. Dad screamed and blamed everyone. I read it over and over. No pain. Just a strange kind of stillness settling into my chest. I dried my hands, set the phone on the table, and poured myself a glass of cold water. That evening, while jotting down some work notes and listening to soft piano music, my phone rang. The caller ID showed my father's number. I hesitated for a few seconds before picking up. His voice burst through immediately without greeting. "What kind of stunt are you pulling? The internet's cut off. No power, no hot water. Who do you think you are?" I kept my voice calm. I just stopped paying for the people who kicked me out of my own home on Christmas Eve. Silence. Then a short, snarling laugh. "You're really ungrateful. I raised you all these years." I cut him off. Raised me? I've been working since I was 18. I gave nearly every paycheck to the house. Bought my own clothes, paid for Mom's medicine, fixed the pipes, replaced the heater in winter. Do you even know how much the roof repairs cost 2 years ago? The line went dead quiet. I continued, my voice even, steady. "If you decided to throw me out, then you should also be ready to live like I never existed. I'm no longer responsible for that house." He exhaled sharply, his tone thick with rage. You'll regret this. I hung up. I didn't shake. I wasn't afraid. I just felt light. Like I'd finally stepped out of a nightmare that had gone on for too long. A week later, while I was sorting accounting documents at work, my phone buzzed nonstop. 6 missed calls from Mom. 3 from Dad. 1 message from Dylan. Internet's down. Dad got so mad he smashed the remote against the wall. I set my phone aside and went back to my work. Not because I didn't care, but because I had cared too much for too long for people who never appreciated it. That evening, Naomi and I were preparing dinner when my phone rang again. I hesitated, then answered. My mother's voice came through, frail and tired. Maya, I don't understand what's going on. There's no electricity. No internet. No hot water. The TV won't turn on. Your father is losing it. What are you doing? I stayed calm. I'm not doing anything. I just stopped paying for everything I used to cover. Her breathing turned shallow on the other end. She whispered, So, all of this, it was you? I didn't answer. She went on, voice trembling. But, your father thinks you're trying to get revenge. I let out a dry laugh. No, Mom. Revenge is for people who still matter. I'm just living the life I deserve. And the reason it unsettles you is because I'm no longer living it for anyone in that house. I hung up before she could say anything else. I sat down in my chair, heart quiet. Outside, snow had begun to fall, gentle flakes resting on the window pane. I looked out, not thinking about the past, just quietly grateful that I was living for myself. And that didn't require anyone's approval. On Monday morning, as I was about to walk into the office, I heard a strange noise near the glass entrance. I turned around and saw a woman collapsed on the sidewalk, her scarf slipping from her shoulder, one hand clutching the railing, the other pressed to her chest. I started toward her and my heart stalled. It was my mother. Her hair was disheveled, her face paler than I'd ever seen, her eyes shut like she had fainted. I rushed to her side, kneeling down, my voice low. Mom? No reply, but I noticed her eyelids flutter slightly. She was still conscious. I called Naomi from the front desk, then helped the security guard carry her into the staff lounge. I brought her water, placed a warm cloth on her forehead. When it was just the two of us in the room, my mother slowly opened her eyes and whispered, Maya? I said nothing. I just stood there watching the woman who had given birth to me, who once taught me how to tie my shoes, who once said family was the safest place in the world. She sat up slowly, her frail hands wringing together like searching for something to hold on to. I'm sorry for not saying anything that night, she began, eyes full of worry. But you know how your father is. He has a temper, but he's not a bad person. I looked at her, composed as if I were listening to a stranger's story. He didn't need a temper to say what he said. He meant it, Mom. And you stayed silent. Her head dropped, eyes welling with tears. Come home. We need you. Things are really bad. My voice was soft. I'm not part of that home anymore. You know that. She didn't respond. She looked around the modest break room as if trying to measure just how far the distance between us had grown. I stood, picked up the now dry cloth and water bottle. Do you need a ride? She shook her head. I can manage. I walked her to the door. She didn't look back. Didn't say another word. 3 days later, after work, I headed to the parking lot as usual. But the spot where I always left my steel gray sedan was empty. I froze, wondering if I'd parked in a different spot that morning. I walked the lot, checked each row. Nothing. I opened the car tracking app on my phone, but the signal had been disconnected. The account had been logged out from another device. My heart pounded. I called Naomi, asked if she'd borrowed my car that day. She said no, the keys were still in the kitchen drawer. I rushed home, opened the drawer, pulled out my set. But then I remembered, when I first bought the car, I had given my mom a spare key for emergencies. I didn't remember ever taking it back. He might still have it. I called the lot management office and requested the security footage. The guard on duty agreed to help and took me to the monitoring room. We rewound the morning tape. At 7:15, a tall woman wearing a gray coat and knit cap approached my car. She looked around, then pulled keys from her coat pocket, unlocked the door and drove off like she had every right to. I stared at the screen. I didn't need to zoom in to recognize that posture, that slight lean in her walk, that unbrushed dark hair. It was my mother. I stood there in silence for a few seconds. Not shocked, just carved out a little more inside. Whatever fragile thread of trust had remained, thin as spring ice, had just cracked beneath me. I left the security room, sat in Naomi's car, hands gripping the steering wheel, eyes fixed forward, seeing nothing. That evening, when Naomi got home after her late shift, I was still sitting at the kitchen table, a cold cup of coffee in my hands. "Where's your car?" she asked softly. "My mom took it," I said, not blinking. Naomi froze. "Took how?" "I think she used the spare key. Drove it out of the lot this morning." "Did you call the police?" "I will." Naomi stepped closer, laid a hand gently on my shoulder. "You didn't do anything wrong." I pressed my lips together as if trying to hold something tightly inside me, something I didn't want spilling out. I just didn't expect the one who followed my father to the end would be my mother. I opened my phone and checked the device locator, but every signal from the car had been disabled. The account used to access the car's system had either been changed or reset completely. That couldn't have happened without the key and paperwork in hand. I opened my call list, my hand trembling slightly as I tapped the familiar number. "Dylan." He picked up almost immediately. "Can I call you?" I asked softly. Are you okay?" "I'm fine. But I need to ask, do you know who took my car? Did you see it at the house?" He was silent for a moment, then spoke in a low voice. "This morning I saw it parked in front of the house. There was Mom's coffee bag still inside. I guess it was her." "Thanks. Are you okay?" "Not really. But I still have the phone you gave me. I'll take care of this soon. Don't worry." I hung up and opened my folder of documents, flipping to the section marked Personal Property, Vehicle, and double-checked every paper. The car was fully in my name. No one else had power of attorney or permission to use it. There was no reason that justified what had happened. I called the county's legal support line, asked about procedures for reporting unauthorized use of personal property, and booked an appointment with the local police. I no longer felt anger. Just a very clear understanding. I had nothing left to lose with them. And my mother, the one who collapsed in front of my office 3 days ago, the one who cried and whispered, "Come home," was the same person who reached into my pocket the moment I turned my back. I decided to return to the old house to retrieve the car, only after confirming that a nearby officer would be present. I didn't knock. I rang the doorbell like a stranger, standing on the very porch where I once waited for late-night pizza or watched winter snow drift down. The door opened. My mother stood there holding the old leather wallet that still had the spare keychain. She frowned but said nothing. I stepped in without waiting for an invitation. Dylan wasn't there, probably at school. My father was nowhere in sight. I headed straight to the kitchen. "Where's the car key?" My mother placed the wallet on the table and calmly pulled out a chair. "Right here." I grabbed it. As I turned to leave, my eyes caught the bookshelf where I used to keep my freelance laptop. The fabric laptop bag was gone. I froze, turned back toward her. "Where's my laptop?" She didn't look up. "Sold it." I turned fully, my heart pounding in my chest. "Sold? How dare you? That was mine." He shrugged. "You don't live here anymore. Things left behind are discarded things. The house needs money." I bit hard on my lower lip. Inside, a part of me wanted to scream, to smash the wooden chair she was sitting on. But I didn't. I pulled out my phone, hit record, my voice trembling from restraint. "So you admit you sold my belongings without permission?" She raised an eyebrow, slightly surprised, but nodded. "Yes." I stopped the recording. "I'm reporting this. That laptop was for work. Full of contracts, client data, personal files. You had no right." For the first time in the entire conversation, I saw her lose composure. "Maya, don't blow this up. I'm your mother." I cut her off, voice steady. "And you just stole from me. No law allows that, not even blood." I didn't stay long. I left immediately and drove straight to the nearest police station to file a report for unauthorized use and disposal of personal property. I provided the recording. They took my statement and said they would open a temporary file and follow up after gathering additional information. That night, while I was sitting on my bed, Naomi brought me a mug of hot cocoa just as my phone dinged with a new email alert. It was from the bank. "Login attempt alert. 5 failed password attempts from an unrecognized device." I felt a chill run down my spine like a sudden gust of wind to the back of my neck. I opened the banking app. Everything was still secure. The account hadn't been breached. But someone was clearly trying. I checked the activity log. Location: residential area near the old house. IP never used before. Device: a Windows computer, no two-step verification enabled. I shut off the screen and looked at Naomi. I think my dad is trying to get into my bank account. She frowned. Are you sure? I'm not sure. But after what happened with the laptop, I'm not ruling anything out. I opened my saved passwords list and began updating every single one. Banking, digital wallets, tax accounts, investment portfolios. I reset all security questions, enabled fingerprint and facial recognition wherever available. I even submitted a request to the tax office to temporarily freeze my personal income file, in case someone tried to use my social security number for loans. By almost midnight, as I was reviewing each transaction statement line by line, a message popped up from Dylan. Dad's tearing up the living room holding Mom's password notebook. I think he's trying to get into your accounts. I clenched the phone in my hand. In my mind, I saw an image of a disheveled man, hands trembling as he flipped through the pages, eyes darting like someone starving for money. I called Dylan. He picked up after 2 rings. Where are you right now? I asked quietly. In my room. I locked the door. Did he say anything? He's walking around mumbling. I know she didn't change them all. She's still using the old ones. Then slammed his hand on the table. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breath. Dylan, listen to me. Lock your phone, don't leave your room. If he does anything, screams, tries to break in, anything at all, you call 911 right away. Got it. Got it. I'll keep the phone with me all night. I hung up, heart heavy. I wasn't just protecting a bank account or a car. I was protecting the one thing that family had long treated as a given, my sacrifice. And now that they no longer had it, they were trying to steal it back. I looked up and stared at the computer screen. Under Confirm New Device, I clicked Deny All. Lock account if any more failed attempts. I didn't know how far they were willing to go. But I knew one thing: I wasn't going to stay silent. And if they wanted to cast me as the traitor to the family, I'd be the traitor with enough evidence to never have to bow my head again. Naomi had just placed the steaming plate of pasta on the table when a thunderous banging on the door startled us both. Our usually quiet apartment shook with the pounding. The chopsticks in my hand fell into the plate, noodles flying onto the corner of the table, but I didn't care. I looked at Naomi, my heart pounding like a war drum. The knocking didn't stop. It grew louder, more violent. A man's voice roared from the hallway. I didn't need to look to recognize that voice. It was William, my father. Naomi jumped up, panicked. Maya, it's him, isn't it? I didn't answer. I walked quickly to the door and looked through the peephole. What I saw made me grip the doorknob tightly. He stood there, face flushed, eyes bulging, hair wild like he'd just erupted from some manic state. He was slamming his fists and palms against the door, shouting, Maya, open up. I know you're in there. You think you can run? I stepped back, pulled out my phone and dialed 911. The dispatcher's voice came quickly. I kept my voice as steady as I could. My name is Maya Bennett. A man is pounding on my door, shouting threats. He's my father. I'm afraid he might do something dangerous. The address is... The dispatcher instructed me to keep the door locked, stay calm, and asked if anyone else was inside. I said yes, Naomi, my roommate. They said the nearest unit was en route and would arrive within 3 minutes. I ended the call and turned to Naomi. She was pressed against the wall, hand clutching the back door key, visibly trembling. I placed a hand on her shoulder and tried to sound calm. It's going to be okay. They're on their way. Another powerful bang shook the door. His voice, like a nightmare that had haunted my childhood, kept pounding against my ears. You're a traitor. You tore this family apart. You think you're so smart, Maya? So smart you don't need your parents anymore. I didn't answer. I just stood there, back to the wall, eyes fixed on the door like waiting for an explosion. Inside, I wasn't panicking. Just a heavy sadness rising from deep within. A sorrow for someone who once held up my world, now standing as the one trying to tear it down. A siren wailed from the street below. Red and blue lights flickered through the window. I heard footsteps pounding down the hallway and a calm male voice. Minneapolis police, sir. Step away from the door immediately. William went silent for a second, then shouted like a cornered animal. My daughter's in there. I have the right to see her. Another officer's voice came, steady but firm. Not like this. You're disturbing the peace and making threats. If you don't comply, we'll be forced to detain you. I heard scuffling, shouts, and the clinking sound of metal, handcuffs locking in place. I looked through the peephole again. William was pinned between two officers. He still tried to thrash, yelling, "You'll pay for betraying your family. You'll regret this forever." I stood still. I didn't cry. I didn't bow my head. I looked at him one last time through that tiny lens. The man who once taught me to ride a bike, who used to carry me over icy sidewalks, now looked like someone trying to escape cuffs without knowing who he was fighting anymore. A gentle knock came at the door. Maya. I unlocked it. Cold night air rushed in. A tall officer nodded with sympathy in his eyes. We've taken him into custody for disorderly conduct and threats. Would you like to file an official complaint? I looked him in the eye. Yes, I would. He nodded and handed me a form. My hands were steady as I took it. Naomi passed me a pen, her eyes still wide with shock. As William was escorted down the stairwell, he turned to look at me one last time. No longer the glare of an angry father. Just the eyes of someone who had lost all control, tossing his final curses into the wind. Maya, you'll never know peace. I stood firm, letting his words blow past me like a cold breeze. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because I knew peace doesn't come from clinging to people like him. It comes when you finally have the strength to let go. And tonight I had done just that. 3 days after the arrest, I had just stepped out of my office when my phone buzzed. A message from Dylan. Just 10 words, Dad's out. Some guy named Rick Dalton bailed him. I froze right there on the sidewalk, people rushing past after work. That name, Rick Dalton, wasn't unfamiliar. When I was younger, I'd heard it a few times in my father's half-joking stories. A man who once had the cops called on him by the whole block for drunken brawls. Got sued for hit and run. Did time for assaulting an acquaintance after a bar fight. My dad called him a brother in arms. Mom just called him one thing: trouble. I texted Dylan back. You okay? He replied, I'm fine. But I think Dad's planning something. He said, this time she won't get away so easy. I didn't reply. I slipped my phone back in my pocket and hurried to the parking lot, my heart sinking with every step. My car was parked near the fence at the side of the building. As I approached, I noticed it immediately, a scratch nearly 2 feet long running across the side. Deep enough to expose the metal beneath the paint. No one accidentally scraped it like that. This was deliberate. I opened the door and sat in the driver's seat. On the windshield, someone had drawn a faint line with what looked like grease. A smudged X. I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone, photographing every detail. The scratch, the mark, the location, the time. When I got home, I checked the security camera above our front door. Naomi had just gotten back from work and was making tea. She turned and asked, "What's going on?" I didn't say anything. I just motioned for her to come over. On my phone screen, the feed from the front door camera was black. No signal. I opened the app. The camera had gone offline early in the morning. No footage recorded between 3 a.m. and 8 a.m. I stepped outside to inspect it myself. The small camera mounted above the doorframe was tilted awkwardly. The plastic casing was scratched, the wiring loose. Someone had tampered with it. Back inside, I couldn't hide the tension anymore. Naomi set her cup down, worried. What's happening? I showed her my phone. Camera was disabled. Car was keyed. Dad just got bailed out by Rick Dalton. My brother says he's plotting something. Naomi's face went pale. We need to call the police. Right now. I nodded. That night, I submitted all the evidence to the city police. Photos of the damaged car, timestamps for the camera disruption, Dylan's messages, and everything I knew about Rick Dalton. An investigator called back that same evening. His voice was low and serious. We've received your report. Based on what you've provided, you qualify for a temporary protection order. But to make it official, you'll need to file directly with the court. You can also request an emergency protection petition if you believe there's an immediate threat. I asked if increased patrol around my home was possible. He said he'd forward the request to the responsible unit. After the call, Naomi sat still at the table, deep in thought. I sat across from her, still holding the printed forms, my chest tightening every time I saw the name William Bennett under person to be restrained. Naomi looked at me hesitant. Why? I think you should leave the city for a while. I looked at her, saying nothing right away. It's not because you're weak, she continued. It's because you need to protect yourself. You're dealing with a man who's already crossed the legal line just to get near his daughter. And now he's got nothing left to lose. I stayed silent for a long time. Naomi reached for my hand, locking eyes with me. I don't want to be the one calling in a missing person report someday just because we underestimated how deep his hatred runs. I nodded, my voice hoarse. I understand. Give me one night to get ready. That night I didn't sleep. I sat down and filled out the emergency protection order paperwork, printing the photos I'd gathered. I called a colleague, Nora, the one who once offered her spare room if I ever needed a place. When she picked up and heard my voice, she didn't ask questions. She just said softly, "Bring what matters most. There's always a room here for you." I hung up and started packing. In my mind there was no hesitation. I wasn't running. I was protecting myself from people who once called themselves my family but never acted like it. And now, when I no longer belonged to them, they wanted to take what little I had left. But I wouldn't let that happen. The message came at 12:12 a.m. The screen lit up in the dark, casting a soft glow onto the ceiling that snapped me wide awake. "Hey sis, Dad's losing it. He's breaking things," yelling from room to room. I'm scared. I shot up, my heart pounding with every word. I called Dylan immediately. The phone rang once before he picked up. "Where are you?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "In my room." I locked the door. Dad just smashed a picture frame in the living room. Mom's sitting quietly, not saying a word. "He keeps calling your name, like he's trying to pull you back here." Dylan's voice trembled even though he tried to hide it. I walked quickly to the living room and called the local police department. I explained the situation, said I had a protection order pending, but right now, I needed an escort to return to my parents' home under monitored conditions. They agreed and said officers would meet me at the designated location in 20 minutes. I got dressed, tucked a new phone and a spare SIM card I'd bought for Dylan into my bag. I had once promised I'd come back if he ever needed me. And now it was time to keep that promise. It was still dark when I arrived at the meeting point. 2 officers were already there. They asked me a few quick questions, checked my ID, and then got in the car with me. The patrol vehicle rolled slowly through the quiet streets of the neighborhood, red and blue lights flickering against closed windows. As we turned down the old street, a tightness crept into my chest. Not fear, pain. Pain that I had to return to a place that used to be home, now as a stranger needing legal protection. The old gray iron gate still groaned when it opened. One of the officers walked ahead and knocked on the front door. Moments later, my mother opened it, her face drawn and sleepless. She froze when she saw me standing behind the officers. Her eyes weren't surprised, just resigned. She silently stepped aside without a word. I walked in. The house reeked of stale alcohol and ashes. Debris was scattered across the floor, an ashtray shattered in pieces on the rug. A recliner was flipped on its side. The family photo frame that once hung on the wall now lay broken on the floor, glass shattered, picture torn at the corner. William was standing in the middle of the living room, hands braced on the table, eyes bloodshot. When he saw me, he didn't yell like I expected. He just stared, like a wounded animal, full of rage and emptiness. I didn't speak to him. I turned to the officer and nodded slightly. "I just need to grab the rest of my things from my room." One officer followed me upstairs while the other stayed behind. Each creaking step on the wooden staircase felt like an echo of a long-buried memory. My door was still the same, but the handle had fresh scratches. I pushed it open. The closet was flung open, a few drawers emptied. My desk had fresh slashes carved into it with a razor blade. A few old books, some keepsakes, and the blanket I sewed in 10th grade were still there, untouched. I didn't let emotion take over. I packed everything that still meant something to me. Old letters, childhood photos, a wooden box of trinkets, little pieces of a life I'd once fought to preserve. I turned to the officer. "I'd like to give my brother something. Is that okay?" He nodded. "As long as I can see you the whole time." I knocked on Dylan's door, 3 soft taps. It's me. The door opened. His eyes were red, hair messy like he'd been through an emotional storm. I stepped in, leaving the door slightly ajar so the officer could see. You okay? I asked. He nodded. Dad drank all night. He kept saying you ruined the family, then just started smashing whatever he could reach. I handed him the backpack. There's a new phone inside. SIM's already in. It's a separate account. No one knows the number. If things ever cross a line, just make the call. He took the bag, eyes shimmering. You think I should leave right now? I looked at him, my voice heavy. Not yet. You're not of age, not legally free. But if it gets dangerous, I'll find a way to get you out, legally. He nodded like he was carving my words into memory. You'll text me every day, right? Always. I placed a hand on his shoulder. Our eyes locked for a long, quiet moment. In the chaos downstairs, this room was the only place with a sliver of peace. I opened the door and went downstairs with the officer. William was still there, saying nothing, but his stare pressed into my back like a boulder. My mother sat silently on the sofa, not looking at me, not asking a single thing. I walked past them like I would strangers. As my hand touched the doorknob, I turned to see Dylan standing on the stairs. I gave him a small nod. He returned it just the same. No more words were needed. He understood. And I understood too. One bond, that old tie that had held us in this house, was now broken. But the one that remained, our trust, was tighter than ever, unbreakable. That morning, snow fell quietly on the porch roof, dusting a soft white layer across the windshield of my parked car. I had just poured myself a cup of coffee when my phone lit up. A message from Dylan, just 4 words. Can I leave now? I stood still in the kitchen, ceramic mug in hand, my heart still and still as a frozen lake. More than a year had passed since that 2 a.m. call. I had counted every day for this moment. I texted back immediately, wait for me. I'll be there in 15 minutes. I didn't have to ask if he was sure. I knew he had waited long enough to say it. Dylan was never impulsive. He was a quiet child, one who learned to endure in silence, who waited with clear, watchful eyes. I drove through snow-covered streets, the tires crunching over the frozen pavement. As I approached the familiar alley, I pulled over and turned off the engine. Beneath a thin layer of snow, the old house looked lonelier and more worn down than ever. The window curtains were drawn shut, and the front gate hung broken on one side. Dylan was already waiting outside in the yard, a black backpack slung over his shoulders, both hands tucked into the pockets of his heavy coat. He wasn't wearing much, but he wasn't shivering either. It was as if the coldness of this place no longer had any effect on him. I stepped out of the car and walked toward him. We hugged tightly. There were no words needed. Just the warmth transferred from shoulder to shoulder, from palms to a back that had silently carried so much. No one said anything when I left, Dylan whispered as we got into the car. I glanced at him as I gently pressed the gas and pulled away from the street that had caged us both for so many years. You never needed anyone's permission to live free, Dylan. You never did. We stopped at a small roadside gas station for some hot tea. Dylan told me that over the past year he had prepared everything. Documents, college applications, even a part-time job schedule at the campus library. Every step was part of a quiet plan he had drawn up on his own without anyone knowing. You know, Dylan said, gently swirling the tea in his hands, every morning I woke up to Dad's complaints and Mom's silent like a ghost. That house, it felt like a sealed trap. No one lived truthfully in there anymore. I didn't interrupt. He didn't need someone to share the pain. He just needed to speak, and I was there to listen. By the time we arrived at the community college dorms, the sky had turned a milky gray. I helped him carry his things into the new room, just a twin bed, a small desk, and a window facing a row of bare trees. But for Dylan, that room meant freedom. I bought you a few basics, I said, handing him a paper bag. There's a notebook in there and a picture of the 2 of us at the park when you were 10. Dylan smiled, his eyes lighting up with a peace I hadn't seen in him for years. Thank you. Not just for these, but for keeping your word. I gently patted his shoulder. I used to be the only one you had. Now I want you to believe, you're the one who saved yourself. A few weeks after Dylan started school, I got a call from an old neighbor. Ellie, who lived 3 doors down from our old house and used to bring over apple pie when I was little. She spoke in a soft, hesitant voice. Maya, I don't want to interfere, but your mother. She sent a letter through someone to give to you. I've been holding on to it. Do you want it? I paused before answering. Yes, please. Thank you. I received the letter on a Thursday afternoon, as the first spring breeze swept lightly across the balcony. The paper was folded in half, the handwriting unmistakably hers. No envelope. No opening greeting, just 3 bold words. Still your mother. I sat on the couch and read it under the warm light filling our small room. The words were both familiar and strange. She talked about days we cooked together, the time I fell learning to ride a bike and she helped me up. But then she also wrote, you broke this family apart. Your father is no longer himself. I didn't know who to side with anymore. And finally, no matter what, I'm still your mother. I folded the letter and set it down. I didn't read further. It wasn't that I felt nothing. I just no longer wanted to hold on to anything that blurred the line between love and control. I had come too far to turn back, and I didn't want to erase the boundary I spent my youth building. I didn't write back. I didn't call. I didn't reply. I kept the letter, not because of the sentiment she wrote about, but to remind myself. Sometimes what we need most isn't an apology. It's the change that never came. December arrived with Minnesota's signature chill, cold but not bleak. The 2-bedroom apartment I rented near Dylan's campus wasn't large, but it was warm, quiet, and most importantly, neither of us had to live in fear every time we heard a door open. In the mornings, I worked at a small desk beside the living room window where sunlight streamed in. Dylan went to class on even-numbered days and worked part-time at the library on odd ones. We each had our own rhythm, but we always made time to sit down for a simple dinner, chatting about a lecture he liked or how the downstairs neighbor owned a cat but hated the sound of meowing. Then, a week before Christmas, Dylan showed up at my door with a cardboard box in his hands, his eyes twinkling mischievously, something I rarely saw. I just got this fake Christmas tree from a dorm friend. They were going to toss it because it's missing a few branches, but I think it still works. I looked at the box and my heart warmed. Since leaving the old house, I hadn't decorated for any holiday. Not because I hated celebrations, but because those days were too deeply tied to painful memories. We laid out a rug in the middle of the living room and pieced the tree together, slotting faded green branches into place. Dylan carefully straightened the bent ones. I brought out a small bag of old ornaments I'd saved since college. A red ball, a silver star, a few olive green paper bows. We don't need much, Dylan said while hanging a tiny bell on the lowest branch. It just needs to have a shape and a little light. I nodded, feeling as light as the final golden ribbon I tied to the top of the tree. The small room suddenly felt strangely tender. We sat on the floor, backs against the wall, admiring the tree we'd just finished. Dylan held a small string of lights in his hand and flipped the switch. The soft yellow glow reflected off the walls, his face, and the brief smile that passed through my eyes. I think, Dylan said after a long pause, if I have kids someday, I'll never let them believe their worth depends on anyone else's approval. I tilted my head to look at him. Exactly. No one gets to define your worth but you. Dylan nodded, saying nothing more, but his eyes softened like another layer of fog had finally lifted from his memory. That night, our dinner was nothing more than hot soup, crispy toast, and 2 mugs of cocoa topped with whipped cream. No presents, no greeting cards, no jingling music in the background. But I had never felt a meal more complete. It had trust, sharing, and peace. After we cleaned up, I pulled my chair closer to the window and looked out at the snowy courtyard in front of our building. The pale yellow streetlight glowed over the wet pavement, and the parked cars sat quietly beneath a thin blanket of snow. I gently placed my hand against the icy window pane, feeling a sensation rise inside me that I couldn't quite define. It wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't revenge. It was a slow release, like someone finally stepping off a train they no longer wanted to be on. I didn't get revenge. I didn't expose anyone, didn't humiliate them, didn't demand back every dollar or every word. I simply chose to stop and walk away. I chose to keep the part of my life they no longer had the right to enter. I chose to live instead of continuing to endure. And that was enough. Dylan sat down beside me, holding a book in his hands. He didn't say anything, just leaned his head gently on my shoulder. His breathing was calm, his eyes moving across the pages while I sat there quietly, looking out at the world beyond. A world that, for the first time in my life, I truly felt I belonged to. Sometimes life forces us to make choices that seem harsh, but in truth, they're simply the way we learn how to love ourselves better. I no longer waited for a late apology or a long overdue hug. What I chose was freedom. And in that journey, I found my brother again. I found what a real family could feel like. Small, maybe, but honest and unconditional. What about you? What do you think about the choice Dylan and I made? Have you ever stood at the crossroads between continuing to endure or stepping out to protect yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because someone out there might feel understood just by reading your words. If this story touched something within you, follow the channel to hear more everyday yet deeply human stories about family, choices, and healing. Because sometimes the quietest things are what make us strongest.